The sky above Earth's jungle shimmered as the sleek metallic craft sliced through the dense atmosphere, its hull glowing faintly from re-entry. Inside, Lieutenant Zorvok watched the terrain below with a smirk tugging at his thin lips. From the cockpit's viewport, he could see endless swathes of greenery, stretching out like a tapestry of primitive irrelevance. He scoffed. This is the fabled Earth? The jewel of the galactic fringe. His voice carried the sharp edge of disdain. Pathetic. Behind him, Kranvek, the squad's tech specialist, adjusted the holographic map projected before him. He hesitated before replying, his clawed fingers tapping rapidly on the console. Primitive or not, sir, their electromagnetic fields are wreaking havoc on our systems. I can't get stable readings on this sector. Zorvok turned, his expression hardening. Excuses, Kranvek. You're a Dominion engineer. Adapt. The soldier stiffened, bowing his head. Yes, sir. Drogar. The hulking warrior seated near the rear of the craft laughed. His voice boomed, filling the cabin. Adapt? For what? To swat oversized insects and uproot weeds? We've conquered entire star systems, Lieutenant. This place is a joke. Zorvok nodded, but his gaze lingered on the jungle below. It was dense, almost unnaturally so, the kind of terrain that swallowed light and sound alike. He felt a flicker of unease, but quickly buried it beneath his confidence. Earth was theirs to take. The craft landed in a clearing, the underbrush flattening under its thruster's force. The squad disembarked, their armored boots sinking slightly into the damp, spongy ground. A cacophony of alien calls echoed from the trees, each sound sharp and strange, as though the jungle itself was speaking in a tongue no one could decipher. Drogar was the first to break the silence, stepping forward with his plasma rifle slung lazily over his shoulder. I'll scout ahead. Maybe I'll find something worth my time. Kranvek glanced at his handheld scanner, frowning. The terrain's electromagnetic interference. Spare me, Drogar cut him off, waving a dismissive hand. It's a jungle, not a fortress. Zorvok let him go, signaling for Kranvek to continue his scans. He knew Drogar's confidence bordered on recklessness, but the soldier was useful for flushing out any surprises, though he doubted Earth had any to offer. As they moved deeper into the jungle, the air grew heavier, oppressive. Vines hung like natural nooses, and the foliage seemed to close in around them. Kranvek's equipment flickered erratically, the holographic display sputtering before vanishing entirely. He cursed under his breath, smacking the device. This is more than interference, he muttered. It's almost as if the environment is actively resisting us. Zorvok didn't respond. His eyes scanned the shadows, searching for threats. Drogar's voice crackled over the comm, breaking his concentration. Found some wildlife. Ugly little things, the warrior said, amusement in his tone. A distant burst of plasma fire followed. Not much of a fight, though. Kranvek winced. He shouldn't antagonize the ecosystem. We don't fully understand. Enough, Zorvok snapped. Drogar is testing the waters. Let him. The squad pressed on, their path marked by Drogar's occasional bursts of laughter and gunfire. Zorvok began to notice subtle signs of movement in the periphery. Branches swayed without wind, and the ground seemed to tremble ever so slightly. He dismissed it as an effect of the jungle's density, unwilling to entertain the notion of danger. Then they found Drogar, or rather, what was left of him. His body lay sprawled at the base of a massive tree, his rifle shattered beside him. Deep gashes marred his armor. The edges of the wounds burned black, as if scorched by something far hotter than plasma. His face, usually twisted in a cocky grin, was frozen in a mask of terror. Kranvek knelt beside the corpse, his mandibles clicking nervously. This wasn't an animal. These wounds are too precise. Zorvok's fist clenched, his earlier confidence fracturing. He activated his calm. Drogar's down. Everyone stay alert. We're not alone. The jungle seemed to respond, its ambient noise growing louder, more chaotic. The calls of unseen creatures blended into a discordant symphony, each sound sharp enough to prick at their nerves. Zorvok's squad tightened their formation, their weapons raised as their surroundings grew more hostile. Kranvek struggled to recalibrate his scanner, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool, insulated suit he wore. I can't get a lock on anything. It's like the entire area is a sensory void. That's impossible, Zorvok hissed, but even he could feel the jungle shifting around them, becoming something alien, something alive. A flicker of movement to their right. Zorvok spun, firing a volley of plasma rounds into the underbrush. The shots illuminated the dense greenery, revealing nothing but trees and shadows. Yet the feeling of being watched persisted, an oppressive weight pressing down on them from every angle. We should retreat, Kranvek suggested, his voice trembling. Regroup, analyze. No, Zorvok interrupted, though his voice lacked its usual authority. We hold our ground. Whatever killed Drogar won't intimidate us. But even as he spoke, he could feel the jungle mocking him, its ancient, unknowable presence swallowing their bravado. In the distance, a low, guttural growl echoed through the trees, and Zorvok realized with chilling certainty that the battle for Earth had already begun, and they were at a distinct disadvantage. The jungle air crackled with tension. Zorvok's squad, disoriented and rattled, moved in tight formation. Their eyes darted through the dense canopy, constantly on edge. They had expected a primitive world, one easily conquered by their superior technology and combat prowess. But Earth's wilderness had shown them a different, far more dangerous face. Drogar's body was a grim reminder of that. Kranvek's scanner flickered again, displaying only static, a mocking testament to the jungle's strange power. His hand tightened around the malfunctioning device, but he dared not speak the words that loomed in the back of his mind. They were no longer in control. Zorvok was seething, but his mind was clear. We need to finish this. We move forward. We've only just begun to understand the enemy's strength. With Drogar's body secured and their ranks closed, the squad pressed on, their movements more cautious now. The sounds of the jungle had become ominously still, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The quiet was shattered by a sudden crash to their left. Kranvek barely had time to raise his rifle before a hulking figure barreled out of the underbrush. It was a man, but unlike any human they'd encountered. He was massive, his skin weathered and darkened by years in the wild, his eyes sharp with an intelligence that belied his brutish appearance. His bare arms rippled with muscle, and his movements were precise, calculated. "Get down!" Zorvok shouted, but it was too late. The man surged forward, grabbing Kranvek by the throat and lifting him off the ground with terrifying ease. The tech specialist clawed at the man's grip, but it was useless. Zorvok and the remaining soldiers opened fire, but their shots went wide, ricocheting off trees and leaving scorch marks in the foliage. Then the air seemed to thicken, and a second figure emerged from the shadows, smaller but no less formidable. He wore a tactical vest, covered in patches from previous engagements, and his face was etched with lines of experience. He was calm, moving with the kind of confidence that came from years of survival. "Drop him," the man said, his voice low and steady. The soldier, Crusher, didn't hesitate. He threw Kranvek to the ground, landing with a sickening thud. The alien gasped for air, scrambling to his feet, but it was too late. Jack Steele, the first man, had already closed the distance and pressed his boot to Kranvek's chest, holding him down with an effortless strength that suggested he was more than just human. "Not so tough now, are we?" Jax muttered. Zorvok's jaw clenched, his hand on his weapon. "You're making a mistake, human. You don't know who you're dealing with." The man didn't flinch. He stepped back, signaling for his team to stand down. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with," Jax replied, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the rest of Zorvok's squad. "And you're trespassing on Earth." Kranvek, still gasping for air, managed to stand, glaring at the humans. "You don't understand. This planet is already under Galactic Dominion jurisdiction. Jax's gaze remained unwavering. Not anymore. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the tense silence. Another figure appeared, dressed in lightweight armor, his movements smooth and methodical. Dr. Liam Carter, the team's biologist and strategist, stepped into view, his eyes scanning the alien squad. He was a man of intellect, quiet but dangerous in his own way. He had spent years studying Earth's ecosystem, its wildlife, and its strange, evolving defenses. It was no surprise to him that Earth had already begun to respond to the intrusion. "What's the status?" Carter asked, his tone almost detached as he observed the aliens. Jax's eyes never left Zorvok. "They've underestimated us." Again, the alien lieutenant's eyes flicked to his squad. His mind was working furiously, considering their next move. "This is not over," he said through gritted teeth. Jax smirked. "We'll see about that." A sharp whistling sound suddenly cut through the air, followed by a rapid thud. Something large and heavy crashed into the ground near them, shaking the earth beneath their feet. Crusher grinned. "I think the jungle's on our side now." Zorvok's eyes narrowed. "What is this trickery?" Carter stepped forward, gesturing to the treeline where several more figures emerged. Humans, all of them dressed in various forms of camouflage, each of them carrying weapons honed to perfection for jungle warfare. These were the true defenders of Earth, and they were far more than just soldiers. They were Earth's symbiotic warriors, born from the jungle, enhanced by it, and ready to fight for their home. Jax turned to his team, giving them a nod of approval. "Show them what we've been working on." The human forces moved quickly, their training and instincts taking over. Crusher, using his brute strength, tossed aside an alien weapon with ease, while Dr. Carter deployed a series of traps that seemed to spring out of nowhere, their bioengineered tendrils wrapping around Kranvek's arms and legs, rendering him immobile. Zorvok watched in disbelief as the humans, once seen as nothing more than insects in the face of a superior technology, adapted to their environment with a fluidity that he had not expected. They were everywhere, using the jungle itself as both cover and weapon. "This cannot be happening," he muttered, his voice filled with a mixture of fury and awe. "They've turned the jungle into their weapon." Jax's voice was calm, yet there was a bite to it. "The jungle isn't just a weapon. It's us. We are its protectors. And now, so are you." Zorvok's eyes flicked to Kranvek, who was still struggling against the biotraps. His mind was racing, considering their options, but it was clear that Earth's defenders were more than prepared for them. The battle had only just begun, but one thing was undeniable. Their underestimation of Earth and its inhabitants had been their greatest mistake. The jungle, with all its terrifying power, was not something they could control. It was alive, thriving, and determined to defend its home. And Zorvok was beginning to realize that no amount of advanced technology could change that. The question was no longer whether they could conquer Earth. The question was whether they could survive it. And with that realization, the true battle for Earth's future had begun. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and burning foliage as Zorvok and his remaining soldiers regrouped. Their attempts to force a retreat had been thwarted at every turn. They had expected a simple conquest, but Earth's defenses, coordinated by the humans, had proven far more resilient than they could have imagined. The jungle was no longer just a backdrop. It was a living entity, and it had taken sides. Zorvok's mind raced, trying to make sense of their predicament. His armor was scratched, his weapons had malfunctioned, and the squad's morale was rapidly deteriorating. Kranvek, still bound by the biotraps, glared at him. The aliens were out of their depth. They had underestimated not just the humans, but the very world they had come to conquer. "We need to adapt," Zorvok muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Kranvek, his voice tight with frustration, snapped back, "Adapt? The jungle is working against us. We cannot fight an environment that refuses to let us." Before he could finish, a low, guttural growl rose from the shadows of the forest, cutting through the tense silence. Zorvok's soldiers tensed, their weapons drawn. The growl was followed by the unmistakable sound of rustling leaves, as though something large and powerful was approaching. Zorvok's heart skipped a beat. We are surrounded. From the darkness of the trees emerged figures. Humans, but different from those they had encountered before. They moved with the same grace as shadows, their eyes gleaming in the dim light. Each one was a soldier, their camouflage blending seamlessly with the jungle itself. But there was something more, something primal, about the way they moved. These weren't just soldiers. They were a part of the jungle. Jack Steele stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. You've seen what we can do with our technology. Now you'll see what we can do with Earth's gifts. Behind him, Carter appeared, his eyes calculating as he surveyed the alien squad. The humans had evolved with the jungle, not just within it. They were as much a part of this world as the trees and vines themselves. Their enhanced strength, their superior senses, and their unyielding will have been honed by Earth's own harshness. The jungle had shaped them into something more. The jungle responded in kind. Without warning, the ground beneath Zorvok's feet shifted, and thick vines erupted from the soil, curling around his legs like serpents. He raised his weapon, but the vines were faster, binding his arms and pulling him to the ground. He struggled, but the more he fought, the tighter they became. "Stop!" Zorvok commanded, but his voice was drowned out by the surrounding chaos. Kranvek was still tangled in the biotraps, struggling to free himself, while the rest of the squad fought to break the jungle's hold. But it was futile. The vines moved with a will of their own, tightening their grip, their surface slick and sticky with a resin that burned like acid. Jax watched calmly, his eyes steady as he observed the jungle's relentless assault. This jungle has been evolving for millennia, adapting to everything that comes its way. And you are nothing but an obstacle in its path. Zorvok's struggles grew weaker as the jungle pressed in from all sides. The realization hit him like a blow to the chest. The jungle had not only been protecting itself, it had been protecting Earth, the creatures that lived within it, the plants that grew from its soil. They were all a part of a living organism far beyond anything he had encountered in his travels. And now, Earth had chosen its defenders, humans who had merged with this wild, unstoppable force. You're not just soldiers," Zorvok gasped, his chest heaving. "You've become one with it." Jax gave a grim smile. "We are Earth's children, and it is our duty to protect her from any who would try to harm her." The jungle responded with a deafening roar, as if answering Jax's declaration. The trees seemed to bend and sway, their limbs creaking under the weight of an invisible force. Something immense and ancient stirred deep within the forest. For the first time, Zorvok felt a true sense of fear. It wasn't the humans he feared anymore. It was the land they called home. Carter stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You wanted to conquer us, but Earth doesn't fall easily. We are its guardians. And if you don't leave now, it will make sure you never leave." With a single motion, Carter gestured toward the sky, and a wave of bioluminescent spores erupted from the jungle floor. The spores glittered in the dim light like a cloud of stars, and as they rose, they twisted and writhed, forming into shapes, tendrils, limbs, massive insectoid creatures. The jungle had awakened. The ground trembled as the creatures closed in, their eyes glowing like embers, their movements calculated and terrifying. Zorvok's soldiers, still bound by the vines, could only watch in horror as the jungle's true power revealed itself. The creatures were no longer merely guardians of Earth. They were the vengeful wrath of the land, and they had judged the invaders. Zorvok strained against the vines, his mind racing. His squad had been beaten, outmaneuvered, and outmatched. The jungle had seen through their arrogance, their underestimation of a world they had assumed was weak. Earth was far more than the sum of its parts. It was a living, breathing entity that had fought for eons to survive, and now it was fighting back. "Do not let them win," Zorvok spat, his voice full of venom. "Fight back." "We will not." But his words were lost as the jungle closed in around them. The vines twisted tighter, and the creatures loomed closer, their growls echoing through the trees. The jungle's judgment was final. In the distance, Jax watched as Zorvok's squad struggled, their weapons useless against the onslaught. The jungle had already won. It had marked its invaders, and now it would see them off forever. Jax turned to Carter, his expression softening. "Let's get them out of here." Carter nodded, his gaze lingering on the defeated invaders for just a moment longer. Earth's message has been delivered, and with that, the jungle's wrath subsided, its defenders returning to the shadows, leaving behind only silence and the broken remnants of those who had dared to challenge it. The jungle had spoken. Earth had been protected. The invaders would not return, and humanity's reign as Earth's true defenders had only just begun.